Politics is everywhere, but everything is broken, and that is not suitable for democracy. Welcome to Not Suitable for Democracy. My name is Nick Hobby, and I'm your host. Each week, we're going to explore the challenges facing American democracy. As you know, there are so many problems in our government, society, culture, and so forth. But I like to focus on the solutions. So we're going to examine the latest news, the biggest topics, and really dive deep into some of what's going on in our country today. Now, on this show, we're going to explore a range of topics from things like money and politics, one of the pillars of the show, voting rights, electoral news, LGBTQIA plus issues, and more. So before we jump into everything, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. This is my very first episode of my very first podcast, so I'm super excited, but also a little nervous. Completely new venture for me. So I'd like to at least share, why I even started, why here, why now. So first off, my name is Nick, pronouns he, him, his. I'm a marketing professional with over 10 years of experience. And I've been in Astoria for over 10 years now. And time really flies when you're having fun. And with my political organizing, I've been doing the work for nearly a decade now. And the fact that we are at a time when part of why we're in this challenge is the fact that not everyone got involved in our democracy. Through my political organizing, I really like to create spaces where people can come together, they can learn from each other, and just have a great time. And if we can build more of that, right, we have an opportunity to bring people together. I've hosted campaign events such as getting out the vote, such as watch parties, such as even the, typical volunteer like phone banks, canvassing, door knocking, petition, signature collecting. All of that requires all of us to get more involved and take the next step. So this podcast is my next step where, you don't have to be exactly where I am, where now we can connect anywhere in the country, in the comfort of your own home or right on your mobile phone. This is our chance to get the word out and spread the message. And I think when looking back at the 2024 election, right, we had 77 million people vote a certain type of way. And that is their right, absolutely allowed to. And 75 plus million people voted for Vice President Harris, thinking that her vision was the best path forward. Now, of course, there's, flaws and critiques that could be made, but at the end of the day, 89 million Americans, registered voters, chose not to participate in our democracy. That is why we're in this challenge right now. The political landscape totally had lost a whole swath of the electorate because our government keeps continuing to fail us, and they're not meeting the problems with solutions that match the scale or the severity of what's going on in our country. So together, I think if we start having these conversations, talk to our friends, families, coworkers, neighbors, people in our community, and create a community that not only sees a new path forward with a new kind of politics, that is how we can truly share our vision of what America should be, could be, and will be when we take the next step and get more involved and actually take back our democracy. Money in politics. We're going to explore how this impacts our democracy. Now, as you know, there are many problems with money in politics, but we're going to keep this focus to three main issues. 1, does more money mean more votes? 2, who are the candidates who become our representatives? And 3, what policies are getting prioritized? So now let's start with the first one. Does more money mean more votes? Now, later in this episode, we're going to see how Elon Musk and his outsized influence could impact our democracy. Now, this didn't happen exactly just for April 2025. This has been going on well before the 21st century, but it got exponentially worse in 2010 when the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Citizens United, which basically equated money as speech, particularly for corporations, unions, and wealthy individuals. Super PACs, these entities that can raise large sums of money, can now raise unlimited funds as long as the super PAC doesn't donate that money directly to the candidate. So it's not corrupt if it doesn't go directly to them, but these super PACs can still pay for opposition research, political ads, and so many important resources that can really determine the outcome of an election. Not only that, but lobbyists and lobbyist groups, they have a huge sway on our elected representatives, particularly in Congress. Let me give you an example. McDonald's French fries. Now, I know it's kind of like a random topic, but hear me out on this one. The way French fries are, made in Europe versus America are basically because different ingredients are used. Less ingredients are used in Europe's McDonald's French fries, whereas in America, there is way more stuff in the fries. And as you know, McDonald's fries aren't exactly the healthiest, right? But that's not by accident. You see, for example, in 2024 alone, the corporate lobby for McDonald's has spent $2,950,000 on our members of Congress. Now, why would they pay so much money? Now, it's not exactly to give them French fries, right? But it's to make sure that there are certain rules or regulations that are either passed or deprioritized to make sure that McDonald's can capitalize on their current system and how they're producing French fries, which, as you know, aren't the healthiest. And that impacts everyday Americans, where if they're consuming this food because McDonald's has the power to just, run rampant with how they're producing, then that's going to impact how we move forward in terms of health and in terms of our safety. And without Congress stepping in, there's really no stopping them. So that is the power of lobbying groups and why they spend millions upon millions of dollars on our members of Congress to ensure that their business needs are prioritized over our needs. So now let's look at the candidates who become our representatives. Now, generally speaking, wealthy people aren't inherently bad because they're wealthy. When they become candidates for government, right, for elected officials, this is where they have a leg up advantage. Wealthy candidates generally have access to large amounts of money, networks of donors, and just resources that generally people don't have access to. So when they're running for office, right, they can easily get hundreds, if not thousands of dollars from people in their network to support their campaigns, which gives them a huge advantage when trying to run their campaign operations. Now contrast that with, middle class or working class candidates. They generally don't have the same access to money or those donor networks, right? So then they'll have to rely on grassroots donations, right? Smaller amounts of money to build up their campaign operations. So if you think about the 2016 election, right? I have to give a ton of credit to Bernie Sanders. You know what his average campaign donation was? You probably do, so say it with me. It was $27. That was the average campaign donation to his campaign for president. Now, why that's important? Because he raised millions of grassroots donations, right? Even getting donations like $5, $10, that was a lot of money raised so he could actually compete. And honestly, I wish more progressive candidates had the chance to compete. So I want to give a lot of credit to Bernie, his movement, and everyone who's been supportive of the grassroots small donor donation model. Regardless of whatever you think of Bernie, he transformed American politics and showed that a small grassroots dollar donation model can be effective and really make change in this country. So, back to the candidates. Once they do become elected, right, generally speaking, it's no surprise that wealthy candidates have an outsized influence in what policies get passed. When you see millionaires in Congress, it's no surprise that most of them have large sums of money outside of their salary. Members of Congress make over $180,000 a year, but most of them are worth, like, they're multimillionaires. And that's not by accident. So now when you think about not only the candidates, right, but think about their perspectives. Think about their life experience. So when wealthy candidates jump into the race, that's going to shape how they lead and what policies they're going to prioritize when they lead. Because of that, this is going to inform what policies get prioritized and deprioritized. Think about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She won her election, her primary election in 2018, not because she raised the most money. She was outspent 13-1. But the beauty of her campaign was that she tapped into a grassroots movement willing to spend small grassroots dollars to support her campaign. And what made her so successful was not only her ability to communicate, not only her really sharp political savvy, but her relatable lived experience. On the campaign trail, she was, she didn't hide the fact that she was a bartender. She was proud of it. And that's what made it so special, because so many working class people in this country understand the struggle to wake up day in and day out to do whatever you have to do to get that paycheck and survive. So now that she is a congresswoman, she always brings that lived experience to the halls of Congress when she leads and supports policies that benefit the working class, especially for those of us in New York 14. So between Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, we can see how they have reshaped politics and opened the door for more progressive candidates to run for office and make a difference in our democracy. Now let's look at the policies that get prioritized. I'll give you an example. Let's focus on healthcare. Healthcare is the perfect example because the healthcare lobby has such a grip on American government that it's no surprise that we still don't have universal healthcare in the wealthiest nation on the planet. Let me throw some numbers at you. In the year 2000, healthcare expenditures, spending from the healthcare lobby, they had spent on members of Congress over $358 million. Okay? $358 million on members of Congress. And it wasn't just because they loved them so much, all right? This was to ensure that they saw the outcomes that favored their business model. Now, let's see what's been going on since then. Well, it's only gotten worse. If we look at the year 2020, that same healthcare lobby, do you know how much they spent on members of Congress? Over $713 million. $713 million. That is a 70% increase on healthcare lobby spending on our members of Congress. So when you see the increase of money up 70% over 20 years, that is why we still don't have Medicare for all, a single payer system, and universal health care in America. Okay, that's a lot of problems, but now let's go through 5 solutions that we can do to take money out of politics. First, we can have publicly funded elections. If we provide candidates with government funding, this will reduce the reliance on private donors. 2, stronger disclosure laws. Without any transparency, we have no idea who or what entity is pouring money into elections. So with these laws, now we'll be able to know where the money is coming from. 3, think about overturning Citizens United. Now, this is definitely an uphill battle, but not impossible. This can be done by introducing a constitutional amendment or overturning the Citizens United ruling with a new Supreme Court ruling. Now, it's very unlikely at this point, but that is something we should be striving for in a new vision for our democracy. 4, small dollar matching program. This encourages grassroots fundraising by matching small dollars with public funds. Now, the perfect example is right here in New York City. The city will match small dollar donations up to 8 times to then be donated to the candidate of your choosing. For example, if you donate $10 to a candidate and they're a part of the public matching program, then the city will multiply your $10 donation by 8, making their contribution $80. So your $10 donation plus the city's $80 donation is worth $90 to the candidate of your choosing. How cool is that? Those are 4 of the ways to get money out of politics. My personal favorite, and this is something that you can do too, is in the next election, primary or general, you make sure to support and advocate for any candidate who rejects corporate and lobbyist PAC money. That is the most direct impact you can make on our democracy and taking money out of politics. And now onto the Wisconsin Supreme Court special election. On April 1st, there was a special election for a 10-year term to a judge seat on Wisconsin Supreme Court. Now, the court is currently divided with a 3-3 split, and this 7th seat would have tipped the scale for if it leans conservative or liberal. The conservative candidate was Brad Schimmel, and the liberal candidate Susan Crawford. Now, this special election was fascinating for 2 particular reasons. First, this was coming only months after Trump was inaugurated, well into his early days of his agenda. And more so, his co-president, Elon Musk. Now, what makes Musk so interesting in this race was that he was pouring money into the race, right? So not only was there outsized influence, but then the other part, why this election was particularly fascinating, was that for a judge seat, right? This was the most expensive election for a judge seat ever recorded in American history. There was an upward of $100 million being poured into this race. An upward of $100 million. That is like Dr. Evil levels of shenanigans. $100 million, right? So it's just wild to think that so much money was just being spent on a judge seat. But that's what it takes when the stakes are so high in the Republicans' quest for power. Now, to be fair, money was pouring in from the Democratic side, from George Soros, and of course, $20 million from Elon Musk on the Republican side. So the other part of the story was that Elon Musk really centered himself in this election. So not only, $20 million from his personal fortune, but he was allegedly illegally bribing voters to vote for Brad Schimmel. Okay? So he had posted on on X, that has since been deleted, about encouraging voters to support Brad Schimmel, and in exchange, he'd give them money. Now, the thought here was that it wasn't necessarily if they voted for Schimmel, but I guess it was more so that they would serve as a campaign surrogate, right? He had to fix his wording because his blatant bribery was, not okay. And that is not suitable for democracy. So toward the end of the race, there was a rally at Green Bay, in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And Musk had awarded 2 voters who apparently already voted for Brad Schimmel a $1 million check, right? So 2 $1 million checks, one for each voter. Now, as much as it's hey, great for them for, getting $1 million, that's not okay for our democracy, right? We cannot be paying people to vote in the way that we prefer. I'm pretty sure our founding fathers would just have their jaws drop if they knew that is what was happening with our democracy, because it's not okay. So even the Attorney General of the state of Wisconsin filed a lawsuit to prevent Musk from paying those voters. More of Musk in the headlines between him pouring money into the race and having this sweepstakes, handing out big fat checks, just paints such a bad picture of the billionaire class, taking over and potentially buying our democracy. And remember, this is going on in the backdrop where, we see Trump making potential cuts to Medicaid, potentially cutting Social Security, slashing life-saving programs like in USAID. and all under Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. Not very efficient, right? And just the idea that Musk was having so much control, right? Hosting press conferences in the Oval Office. This guy who was never elected, never a cabinet member, never confirmed by the Senate, just running wild with our government as he sees fit. That is not what the people voted for. So the backlash, not only we've been seeing Tesla stock dropping, more and more organizers and activists, holding protests outside Tesla dealerships, but even more so, we're seeing the destruction of Cybertrucks, all because of Musk and his toxic brand and what he's doing to our government. People are waking up and they are pissed off. So we are seeing that happening around the country. And now focusing it back here in Wisconsin, that was a referendum on how the voters turned out in this election. And that's what I want to dig into. The night of the election, we saw Susan Crawford win with 55% of the vote, 10 points up for Brad Schimmel, a comfortable landslide. And that is to say that now, with a liberal leaning Supreme Court in Wisconsin, they will be able to protect the people from Trump's harmful agenda. Now, with the turnout, I give so much credit to the Democratic organizers and activists who were on the ground doing the important work to make sure Democrats showed up. If they didn't, essentially, Trump and Musk could have bought this election outright. $20 million. I mean, I don't have that lying under my mattress, right? So it's like, how can we even compete when these billionaires, throw millions of dollars away like it's Trump change? Now, that doesn't mean that we can't prevail, right? And in this case, we totally did. And when we look at the turnout, we're going to start to see, where there's potential in future elections. So I'm going to read off some numbers and actually compare this to the 2024 election, right? Just a few months earlier. So bear with me here. Okay, so in 2024, we know that, President Trump won the state of Wisconsin, but not by much, okay? Trump won 1,697,262 votes in the state of Wisconsin in 2024. That was the highest votes for a Republican candidate for president since Ronald Reagan. So, pretty incredible that many folks had turned out to vote for the Republican candidate. But they didn't show up for Brad Schimmel. In 2024, again, Trump only won by 29,000 votes. That is such a small margin, basically like a football stadium of voters, right? So even though Harris didn't win a single swing state, she only lost Wisconsin by 0.86% of the vote, less than 1%. So she almost had it there, right? So even though turnout wasn't high enough in Wisconsin in 2024, oh, you bet they turned out in 2025. Now, with everything that was going on, right, that played a huge factor in the drop in turnout for the Republican side. So let me go through some numbers here. In 2024, VP Harris won 1,668,229 votes. Susan Crawford, she won 1,301,128 votes. That was a 22% drop off. All right? Remember that 22% drop off from 2024 to 2025. Now, on the Republican side, again, Trump had close to 1.7 million, but Brad Schimmel only earned 1,063,244 votes. The drop off there, 37%. 37% of voters did not show up for the conservative candidate for judge. Now, that is how the Democrats won. Organizers did amazing work, but there was a huge drop off. Now, let's go through that. One, we know that a presidential election in a historic election like 2024 is going to have a higher turnout compared to a judge seat in a special statewide election in an off year. So there's naturally going to be a drop off. Less people are interested. when the race isn't as high visibility. But number two, like I said, the backlash to Musk totally hurt the Republican turnout, and people were not pleased, especially in the backdrop of the oligarchy class trying to control and buy out our elections. Now, the third reason, when you look at turnout, specifically from 2025 and 2024, the counties that Trump won in 2024, most of them went to Brad Schimmel in 2025. However, when you look at the Democratic side, VP Harris won a solid number of, Democratic counties. But Susan Crawford actually flipped some of the Republican counties to Democrat in 2025 because of the higher turnout, and higher turnout for Democrats and lower turnout for Republicans. So in a way, Democrats out-organized. They got people to the polls, even though there was a huge chance that $20 million from Musk and his, sweepstakes of buying votes, right? That could have really hurt Democratic side if the turnout was higher for Republicans. Now, when you look at the map, again, we see these counties happening in the southern part of the state, all around Milwaukee. That is where Democrats did exceptionally well and surpassed expectations. Now, what's happening locally, I can't say for sure since I'm not necessarily there, but I can say the backlash to what was happening from Trump's agenda was particularly making an impact on this key demographic in this area of the state. These are the moments that we need to be focused on, because if these counties can flip in an off-year special election in a swing state like Wisconsin, then I suspect that there are more opportunities like that in other counties, in other states around the country. That is where we have to focus our attention, and that is why we have to keep having these conversations, telling our friends, telling our neighbors, telling our family how if we can just talk about the election, encourage people to vote, and really consider what's at stake, that is how we take back our democracy. And together, that is how we set ourselves for a better path for the future. So when you think about it, despite all the money that Musk was pouring into the election, that was not enough to overpower the power of Democratic voters and the power of democracy. And that's our show. Thank you so much for tuning in to the very first episode of Not Suitable for Democracy. I truly appreciate your support. If you liked what you heard or want to learn more, then make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. If you want to go deeper on some of the topics from today's show, then make sure to subscribe to my Substack, nsftpod.substack.com, or follow along for fun features and new content every day on Instagram at nsfd_pod. And remember, democracy is not suitable without you.